Clemson picked up their third win in a row, but it'll all be for naught if they can't get revenge in the Palmetto Bowl. To help me break down the Clemson versus South Carolina game, I have Calvin Kraft from Shakin the Southland. Calvin, I appreciate you joining.
Thank you, Ryan. It's a pleasure to be here once again.
Yeah, so let's dive right into it. So Clemson's running the ball better now than they have been. And they run it more than they pass it, which I think has been an encouragement to a lot of fans. They're running it 51.2% of the time. And that's probably lower than it really is lately because they've been running it more lately. The Cox, on the other hand, are very pass heavy towards the bottom of college football in run percentage, only 44.5%. They only ran for 21 rushing yards in a win against Kentucky. Mario Anderson has some big playability. I think he's a good running back, but they just can't run it consistently. Are they going to try to run it, or are they just going to immediately just go to the passing game because Clemson's pretty good against the run? How do you see that playing out?
Well, I mean, they really couldn't run it last year either. The way they got around that, I mean, I think they had a couple of maybe a close-in touchdown run. Rattler it should have never happened. He should have been sacked. Trotter missed him, and he scored on a scramble, which he can do. I mean, but it's a lot of that screen. It's very, a lot of people I've seen are pulling Georgia Tech comparisons, and it's now Georgia Tech can run it at you way better than the Gamecocks can. They're deeper at running back. South Carolina's really banged up at running back. I think they only had 2 scholarship healthy guys. Even bringing Leggett and making him running back from time to time, just to, so that Clemson's got issues too at wide receiver in particular with injuries. But for them, I think it's horizontal passing game, and then they try to go vertical on you, and that was what they did a lot. And Rattler's very good at that because he's got quick release, strong arm. He gets it out on time, on target, which is the key to those screen games. Like, we know from when DJ was here, he really, that was not a strength of his. He struggled to make those kinds of throws. And just being off half a second on that type of play can be the difference. It's very timing oriented. But Rattler's good at it. So I expect them to try to stretch Clemson side to side using that. They know they can't just line it up and run it at Clemson. The difference is that Clemson's light years better in the back right now than they were this time last year. I mean, it's not even close. I mean, Makuba was a shell of himself and having to play heavy. He got cooked twice bad in that game.
Yeah, really bad
last year. He wasn't healthy and he had to play. There really wasn't anybody else.
Yeah. So
I mean, you got Sheridan Jones back, you got Terrell back, and they can't even get their job back because, not Terrell, but Lucas back, and they can't even get their job back because Terrell's been so good. And of course,
Avion Terrell. Yeah.
And the safeties, we got Colin, you got the safety play is so much better too. I mean, it's just better in the back all the way around. Clemson's pass defense is light years better.
Yeah, and to that point, Calvin, I think the pass defense is massively improved. Like you said, Makuba, to be quite frank, was bad last year because he was playing through injury, and now he's healthy and he looks like an NFL guy. Wiggins obviously got very good towards the end of the year, but he's even better. He's an elite first-round kind of guy. I think he's almost certainly gone, probably in the first round after this year. Jay Lucas is hurt on and off, so I think that's a big part of the reason he's not getting as many snaps. But like you said, Avion Terrell now is coming on late in the year. So the Clemson has, I really would say, 3 or 4 cornerbacks that I would trust. I mean, between Pride, really more than that. I mean, you got Wiggins, you got Pride, you got Lucas, you got Sheridan Jones. I mean, Avion Terrell. Yeah, Sheldon Lewis. You got 6 guys.
Sheldon, and you got, it's just so much better back there. I mean, the pass defense has been really, really good. I mean, what you don't see are guys just getting cut loose much now. I mean, even the plays that are getting made in the passing game. A lot of them are contested.
Right.
They're having to be, there had to be tough throws, tough contested deals. And that as a coach, that's what you're saying. I mean, sometimes a good player is going to get you. You got to make them get you like that. You can't have them where, like last year,
where you make a dumb mistake and
4 yards wide open, come across the field. Where
So Khalil Barnes has also been a big part of that. I want to make sure I mention him. Okay, well let's
remember all the names, but Barnes has been amazing. He's outstanding. His instincts are ridiculous.
He's really, really good. Okay, well, I don't want to be. This isn't like a Homer podcast here, so let's talk about something that South Carolina does have a really clear advantage on, and I think it is that passing game. As good as Clemson is in pass defense, let's be honest, South Carolina has a much better passing game than Clemson. They did last year too, and they threw for 360 yards. Pretty much the only reason they won the game. And right now they're 15th nationally in passing yards per game. That's really good. 291.1 yards per game. Clemson's only 55th at 236.8 yards per game. Well behind them. Spencer Rattler has 3,074 passing yards. Cade Klubnik only has 2,480. So that's like nearly 600 behind him. Spencer Rattler's really good. And then the thing we got to talk about, I want you to kind of dive into this. We've spent a lot of digital ink, and I've talked about it a lot on this YouTube channel, is how Clemson needs an elite outside wide receiver. And Nate Wiggins has done a great job as we faced him. Keon Coleman was one that comes to mind. Tez Walker was an awesome matchup last week. Arguably the best one we were going to face all year. Xavier Legette, 6'3", 227 pounds, outside wide receiver. Really strong, but also really, really fast. I was doing a little research on him. They said they've clocked him over 22 miles per hour. Dabo Swinney was just talking about how Nate Wiggins is one of the fastest, his run to cause that fumble against Amari and Hampton was one of the fastest plays they've ever clocked, and he was going 22 or slightly over. So this guy's bigger than him, and he's got that kind of speed. He's got 1,187 yards, 7 touchdowns. He's averaging 18.3 yards per catch. Insane. Had 94 yards, 2 touchdowns in their win over Kentucky, their best win of the year. Compare that to Clemson. Bo Collins might not play because he has that plantar fascia injury. Antonio Williams probably won't play. Cole Turner's definitely not going to play. He's out for the season. Those are the 3 guys I thought would be Clemson's best receivers on the year. And then Randall will play, but he's had a disappointing year, at least in part because of a broken hand. So he's not healthy. How big is this mismatch? Is this something Clemson can overcome?
Well, I think they can overcome it. What it's going to come down to is just whipping South Carolina up front. If you let Rattler set his feet and see, I don't care how your coverage is. I mean, he's good enough that he can fit it in tight windows. He hits. I mean, he's very impressive throwing the football. He's not quite. He can do off schedule stuff. I don't fear him as much as I did Drake May in that regard.
No, not to that level, but he's very good.
Being just Houdini type stuff, but he made a couple of. I mean, he can do it, and he's carried this team on his back all year long without question. I mean, if they didn't have him, this team would probably have 1 win, maybe 2, in my opinion. Now, I think it's funny with the Legette thing. I think he's a good lesson in, the people that might be banging on an Adam Randall or whatever right now is like Legette didn't do really anything for a while. And then he's sort of like their Cornell Powell story where his last year, the light just, he had flashes. He ran a kickback last year against A&M or whatever. I mean, he's always had this kind of athleticism. I mean, it's not like he all of a sudden woke up and ran 4.4, 4.3, whatever he runs. He's had that. It's just a matter of now he's just basically some guys, it's like K-Part for Clemson on defense. It's like when the light comes on, it just whenever that is, they just put it all together and all those tools they've had, they know how to use them now. And that's sort of happened for him. He's dangerous, for all those things. The thing I think that Clemson can do is they don't need to load up to stop the run. Like they don't need to commit. No, the thing I think they had to end up do last year, because one thing I was disappointed with Clemson's defense last year was generating a 4-man pressure. As great as on paper Miles Murphy was and Brzee in these first round, Clemson really just couldn't whip guys with a 4-man front the way. I mean, Wes is still sending some pressures, obviously, but Xavier Thomas being healthy, he's been a major issue for people. He hasn't had the big stats, but he has generated a lot of stuff and a lot of holding and all this kind of thing. And then, of course, we know that Parker's been great, and the inside guys have been really, so when they do send like Trotter, for example, or Woodaz on blitzes, these guys are coming clean a lot more than they're not because of the front four, where last year I felt like Clemson had to blitz to generate pressure a lot more than they're having to now. And that was they had to do it, and then they exposed the back end who couldn't really hold up like they can now. So I think that they can control South Carolina's running game without committing, and that maybe keep, play more too deep behind, and let Wiggins, that's how you're going to deal with that horizontal game, is you get up and you can press it, but this allows you to protect behind it a little bit. They'll make some plays because Rattler's good but Kentucky had one good defensive lineman really on this year's team, and he wrecked house for the majority of that game up front. And Clemson's got 3-4 dudes like that and we saw what North Carolina, now granted that was the beginning of the year, but we saw what North Carolina's line, who's got a pretty good line. They just put Rattler on his back over, and that guy's he's like the third most sacked quarterback in Division I or something like that this year. I mean, Wes, teams, Notre Dame at first, what they were doing, they were moving the ball, and then, but, same thing, North Carolina, I think early on, and even Georgia Tech on their first drive. I mean, it was a short one because of that fake punt or whatever, but they, some teams have had some success, but as the only game that was the exception to that really, other than that very first game when they just sort of folded because of turnovers, and was the Miami game. But Miami's offensive line is way better than South Carolina.
Miami has a very good offensive line. That's right. Okay, I think that's all well said. I think it's interesting that South Carolina has beaten Clemson on the recruiting trail for some of these offensive linemen. Maybe they're promising them early playing time because their offensive line is so bad. I do think it's important for Clemson. Some of these other games, once you've lost to Miami, and then especially after the NC State game, I don't know how much that North Carolina game really matters in terms of really anything. You're not going to accomplish any of your team goals. This game, I feel like they recruit head-to-head a lot. It's just so huge for the momentum. It's so huge for the fan base. And they're going head-to-head and losing those battles with the offensive line. I think they do need to beat them up front. I think to win the game, they're going to have to dominate up front. The other area where Clemson has a pretty obvious disadvantage is a kicker. Obviously, that's not going to win you the game, but it could be the difference in a close game. Mitch Jeter is 12 for 14. I don't know if he's as clutch as Derek Jeter, but that's pretty good. And then Jonathan White's only 8 for 14. He missed another field goal against UNC. I don't know that we need to talk about that, but felt like it would be fair to say that and give them 2 advantages. Okay, well, we've been fair, and we've talked about where South Carolina has some really legitimate advantages in this game, not to mention they're at home. Well, I think Clemson has the biggest advantage in this game. Before I dive into that and we start discussing it, I want to remind folks, first of all, if you've already subscribed to this channel, thank you. If not, please click subscribe below. And if you are a subscriber, go ahead and give a like to this video if you're enjoying it. It'll help other people see it. All right, so I think the biggest advantage that Clemson has in this game, I think the best unit in this game is Clemson's defense, and the worst unit in this game is South Carolina's defense. Clemson is 10th in total defense, only allowing 288.6 yards per game. South Carolina is averaging they're allowing 402.6 yards per game, so 114 more. That's a pretty huge gap. That's 96th nationally, so that's not a good defense. Huge gap there. And I think, kind of to your point, South Carolina's got some, an elite wide receiver and a quarterback who could sling it, but this front is going to give them a hard time. And what could South Carolina's defense do? I mean, is this going to be kind of like Clemson versus North Carolina, where weakness on weakness and Clemson comes out on top?
Yeah, South Carolina's kind of made some structural changes defensively in the last couple of weeks where I expect them to use a very Duke-ish, Duke Wake, the type of approach those two tried to use against Clemson, where they play deep shell behind, just trying to keep everything in front, make Clemson have to execute a bunch of plays and wait for a self-destructive moment, which Clemson was obliging with a ton earlier in the year. And they still, we saw even last week down in the red zone, another red zone turnover. If you don't have the horses to kind of attack, like in Miami tried to, they've got better personnel on their defense, especially up front. So they, but Tonka Hemingway is a good player. He can create some issues, and but I think they're gonna just try to shell it up, and but Clemson's running game has gotten way. Those Sadler and him coming back and getting in there on the offensive line, I think they finally have gotten to a 5 that work.
Yeah. Hey, let me give you some numbers to react to. So Clemson's, we talked about South Carolina's rushing game, only 87.6 yards per game average, pretty abysmal. That puts them at 126th out of 130 teams. So the 4 teams who actually run it less effectively than them are Akron, Wazoo, Colorado, and Hawaii. And of course, Colorado, their lack of running game has been talked about a lot. They average 2.8 yards per carry. So and that includes, 70, a 72-yard, a 75-yard run by Mario Anderson, and a couple big plays. So abysmal. Clemson, 42nd, so still not great, but a heck of a lot better. 176.7 yards per game, 4.4 yards per carry. But to your point, they're averaging 228. So big jump there in their last 3. If they did that across the whole year, that'd put them 5th nationally. The only Power 5 teams doing better than that on the full season are UCF and West Virginia. So talk a little bit more about this running game. I just wanted to give some numbers to folks.
Yeah, I don't know what it was, but before the Notre Dame game, and I was super worried about that because Notre Dame, I really respect their defense in particular. And I said in my preview on Shakin the Southland that if we saw success offensively in that game, that it would be something you could get excited about. Whatever come to Jesus meeting happened. And I think part of what they're doing is if you get whipped, they just take you out. I mean, I've seen it. Yeah. I mean, Mitchell Mays, Trent Howard, I've seen those guys get benched quick. Like Trent Howard was getting worked by that Georgia Tech defensive lineman, and he didn't last long before he was out, and they put somebody else in there. And good, I think it sent a message. These guys, hey, you better perform, and we're going to try to find somebody who will. And I think you just got to hack guys up. Shipley and Maffa are going to punish people if you can just not let guys run free on them. And since Shipley's come back, he's finally looking like the guy that can pop, because his longest run before he got hurt at NC State was 19 yards or something like that all year.
It seemed like he had lost a step. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
he wasn't winning. He wasn't winning one-on-one.
Yeah.
In the second level. Like I distinctly remember in the Miami game in the overtime that we had to kick the field goal. We caught, he was one-on-one with the safety. He was the only guy left. He gets by him, it's a touchdown, and he couldn't get by the guy. But we saw on that draw play that he scored on against North Carolina, he whipped 2 guys.
Yep.
And then took it to the house. And, that's what we need, because Maffa's good too, but he didn't. Shipley's got a little more giddy up and just being able to win, because the offensive line, I mean, really their job is to get you to the second level. What you do at the second, third level, yeah, you need wideouts to block, but eventually there's going to be one unblocked guy generally, even if you had everything up, and that's going to be a safety, and you got to beat him. And the great backs, like ETN, Spiller, those kind of guys routinely whipped whoever that last guy was. If you got him to him, it was over. And Ship can do that, and it's great that he's doing that again, and it's just in time. South Carolina is going to have an issue with that. The key to this, as you mentioned earlier, is Clemson has not played nearly as well on the road. South Carolina, they generate at least, especially early in the game. I know Beamer got on them about, there's guys tapping out, or their fans tapping out earlier, and students and stuff in a tight game. But, they'll get their whole flat, towel waving sandstorm, all that kind of mess going. It'll be loud. It'll be, they need to do, in Clemson's defense in particular, if they can do what, the last few times they've been at Williams-Brice and dominated, is the defense has done something right out of the gate that shut them up. You had Ryan Carter pick 6. You had, all of that type of stuff that, right out of the gate. And then Clemson was able to jump on them. I mean, if you get ahead of this team and South Carolina is forced to try to play comeback, they're in really bad shape. They need this game to be ugly and get it into the, and hope that the crowd stays in it, and then they, generate some havoc that way. But they are much better at home than they are on the road, and Clemson's vice versa. So that could be a big X factor in this game.
Yeah. So I want to talk about a few things you mentioned. That offensive line, you talk about Trent Howard getting yanked against Georgia Tech. He was outstanding against Notre Dame. And that's the weird thing about this line, is I feel like you come into every game and the previous game is absolutely no indicator of what you're going to get in this one. If Clemson went out and just bulldozed them and just ran down their throat, I wouldn't be surprised. But if they couldn't run it at all, I also wouldn't be surprised. So that's one weird thing. We talked about Shipley. I want to get your thoughts on this. He ran down the hill. He was asked about it afterwards, and I think, totally normal answer. He said, I don't know what opportunities will present themselves to me, so I figure I run down now rather than never get the chance in case I do. Referencing the NFL draft more so than the transfer portal, but think he's potentially leaving after this year? Do you think that's a real shot?
I'd probably, it depends on how he finishes. I'd probably give him a 60% chance he's not coming back, 40 that he will. That's probably what I would say at the moment. The thing about running backs is in this market, NFL, I mean, it's a changer. I mean, is it really, it's kind of tough on that, there's going to be a lot of people in these guys' ears to start their clock early, if they can. But what's his projection? What's his draft grade?
Yeah. And I think
that remains to be seen. And who knows? He might try to grad transfer somewhere. I mean, he's going to graduate in December. But I'll remind everybody too that there's about 3 or 4 dudes playing this year that ran down the hill at senior day last year.
Yeah,
they came back. So it's not written in stone. And I understand why you would do it, because if you do go, you want to say you had the chance to do that.
Yeah, just thought that was interesting. Okay, well. We're coming up on time, so let's wrap this and we'll hit one last topic. Fine, let's end with your prediction. If you're ready to give it, if you're ready to give a score, that's awesome. But if not, just your overall prediction on the game, how it plays out. All right, let's end with this. If you're ready to give a full score prediction, let's go for it. Otherwise, at least, who do you think wins? How do you think it plays out? Big Palmetto Bowl, does Clemson get revenge? What do you think?
Well, it's just impossible to predict the turnover stuff. I mean, all these games, who gets the big one, it could change everything. If Clemson can play clean early, this game will be a blowout. Clemson will blow South Carolina out if Clemson plays clean, but that is a huge if, because we've seen disaster moments and you think that you're past it and then something happens and you're not, and it's just really hard to know with this team. And Cade, he's doing better, but he's still there's still those moments, where he just does something where you're like, whoa, even that touchdown run at the end of the first half was just a really bad decision, really, that turned out okay. He just miraculously made that happen.
Yeah, he admitted as much, as did Dabo Swinney.
So those moments, and that's at home. I mean, this is not what the whole crowd, early on in the game, it's going to be nuts in there with the noise and everything else. I mean, they're going to bring it. They're going to. I mean, they got their bowl eligibility on the line. They always convince themselves, even in years when they should never have a prayer thinking they're going to beat Clemson, to convince themselves they're going to do it. And to be honest, last year they shouldn't have been on the field with Clemson, and the Clemson played bad enough and made enough mistakes to help them win that game, especially in special teams with the turnovers. It was awful, and it was enough help that I thought once they got ahead of them a couple scores, it was going to be But that South Carolina team was more equipped to hurt Clemson than this one now, other than being at home versus on the road. That's the only
big difference, though.
I think they were better on defense last year, and pretty substantially so. They were better at corner. They were able to play absolutely.
Yeah, they had good cornerbacks.
They played cover. They played man, single man, and cover zero a ton, especially in the second half. And kind of entice Clemson to check out of run calls and try to throw it, and it was a disaster. Clemson's wide receivers, once Bo got hurt and went out, they could not win one-on-one at all. And, even when they did, Ngata dropped the ball.
EJ Williams dropped the ball, yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's just they just couldn't beat it. And, I much prefer having Garrett Riley, diagnosing what they're trying to do.
To that point, I think Brandon Streeter, I wrote an article and got kind of excoriated for it. I don't think Brandon Streeter was the problem per se. But the thing that he did that drove me crazy, was most evident in that South Carolina game, is he did whatever the other defense wanted him to do. He would always let them dictate to them. And there is an aspect of taking what's there, but it was to such an extreme that no matter how much they stacked the box, Clemson was running on South Carolina. And no matter how few guys they had in the secondary, Clemson couldn't complete a pass. So why play into it if you just know you're just so bad at passing and they're so bad at stopping the run? Then the numbers don't matter. And that's I think ultimately what cost Clemson last year, and they won't make that mistake. So I'll give my prediction first. I'll let you give yours, and we'll got like 2 minutes. We can talk basketball to wrap up. I think it's hard for Clemson to really, really blow teams out when they don't have explosive players. Bo Collins might not play, and Antonio Williams pretty much definitely won't play, is what it sounds like. So I think it's going to be a lot of these slow drives, and if they don't make the turnovers, I do think they'll win. But I think, the 41-14 type thing they did against Georgia Tech is less common. There was 4 picks in that game, right? That's why they blew them out by that much. I don't think it'll be quite that good. Being slightly optimistic, I think Clemson wins 31-17, but I could see it being closer. Xavier Legette is definitely, a serious problem. It's going to be great to watch him versus Nate Wiggins. That's the matchup to watch. So I think Clemson wins. I think they win by more than 7.5, which is the spread, but I don't think it's just a total obliteration.
Yeah, I mean, you can't predict turnover. I guess, like I said, if it's 0-0 turnover, let's just say even South Carolina doesn't turn it over, and I think Clemson's easily 2 touchdowns better, just because football is a line of scrimmage game more than anything else. I mean, just look at 2008 Clemson against Alabama. I mean, we had Jacoby Ford, C.J. Spiller, James Davis. We had dudes in the skill positions that could run with anybody, but they kicked Clemson's tail in the line of scrimmage. It was just not even close, and it didn't matter. Yeah, I mean, it got a couple of, I think Ford had a long slant or something, and they might make a play or two, and that's what we're seeing happen is Clemson's front, like I said, with the exception of toward the end of the Miami game. Even against NC State, they were doing nothing. I mean, if Pride can make a tackle in the open field and slant, they're not doing anything in the second half at all on offense.
Do you have a score prediction?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of going what I've done the last couple of weeks. I put Clemson in that 30 to 34 range. I think South Carolina is going to struggle to get to 20. So I'd go 30 to 14, something in that ballpark is what I'm thinking.
Okay.
Kind of like 2 years ago where they got, it was a goose egg, but that South Carolina offense wasn't as good. But, I think Clemson can get to 30, 35. It'll get uglier than that if they just kind of just start blowing runs open and just, popping runs on them. But I will say this, like slot receivers have given South Carolina major problems. I mean,
that's the one thing Clemson does have.
Yeah, and Tyler Brown, That's where he plays, and he's the best, and he's the most explosive threat. And you got Brennan Stool too. He's not a slot, but I mean, he's really stepped his game up second half of the year. So we'll see. It'll be fun though, because anytime the atmosphere is juiced, and that win last year for South of the rivalry, anytime it does, anytime when you win a bunch in a row, you start to. I kind of went through this growing up in the 80s where we'd go through these 4 or 5 year streaks and just it wouldn't be close. And you just kind of like, oh, well, then they win one and you remember why you hate losing to them so much. I mean, it's like it just reignites it. So
it is definitely reignited. That's for sure. Hey, let's put a pin in it there. That was a great conversation. Thanks for joining. I appreciate it. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it having me again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
See ya.